Well, we have 4 or 5 other couples that have signed up to be here, so I'm just going to start because otherwise I'll be here past noon, and I want to get us going on time. There's a baby shower going on at my house, so I'm not as motivated. Last time I gave this, I said I had to build a tree fort with my boys. That was a lot more motivating for me to get out of here, but there's a baby shower going on, so I'll stick around after if there are questions or you guys want to talk. The tree fort is almost done. I've got a few more walls to put up this afternoon, but again, after the baby shower is done, then I'll be given access to my home again, so I can get changed. So, own your stuff. This is a presentation that kind of came out of 10 years of blog post writing and 20 years of advising, and it's what we've been doing and what we've been saying over the years, and it's what our clients have been doing and how they've been succeeding. Not all these ideas are mine. I give a lot of credit to Dave Ramsey over the years for having taught me a lot, and yet I think it's important that as folks look to work with us, what does Cornerstone Wealth Partners and Churchill Mortgage believe? What does Evan Vanderway think about this stuff? So it's important to get this in front of you. So as you think about planning and financial planning, how do you write a financial plan? How often do you review it? Do you delegate financial planning? What parts of it do you delegate? Because you don't want to be an expert in tax or investing necessarily. You don't want to be an investment advisor or a licensed mortgage person. And yet, I think there's too much delegation going on, and as a result, we end up on roads sometimes or tracks, and we figure, hey, is this really where I want to be? And some of it's our own poor decision making. Some of it's the advice of others that were in their best interest and not yours. So this is a quick course. I often say this: financial planning, in one sense, shouldn't be a career path. It should just be a 1 or 2 hour course that you take, you learn, and you apply to do yourself. And then you put the necessary advisors in place to help you. So that's what this is. Now, when I talk about stuff, I'm not getting really kind of high-level philosophical here. I'm talking about the stuff we have around us: the cars, a boat, the house, the land, even your books. I mean, anything that you accumulate over the years, your investment accounts, cottage, all this stuff that we want. Do we own our stuff, or does someone else really own our stuff, or does our stuff own us? That's essentially what we're talking about. We're talking about our stuff, and here's an example of one of these things that my wife Jenny and I bought. Our minivan years were short. I don't think it even lasted a whole year for a couple of reasons. One of them I'll share now was how we acquired this minivan. We leased this van. This was a 2003, I believe, 2003, 2004 Nissan Quest. Cost me $650 a month to own this baby. This was a decision I made, okay, just so you all know, I'm not a perfect financial advisor or investment advisor. This was now 11 years ago. That was my decision. So that'd be about $23,400 over the course of 3 years, and I wouldn't own it. That was my choice, right? Well, I ended up with this value or this idea that to own a really nice car every 3-4 years, trading it in was something that was going to be important to me, right? Well, that's how you do it. You lease it. I probably came up with that value in the Nissan dealership, I would imagine. It was probably a planted seed that grew very quickly as I looked at this thing. 3 sunroofs that had the DVD player in it. We had 3 kids at the time. It was really, really hot. But then, around the same time, about 8-9 months after we leased this van, we looked at starting to build our house. We had purchased a little bit of land. We were going to build our house. And at the time we started to build, additional land was available as well. And I was able to pick up an extra 10 acres for about $650 a month, $675 or something was what it was. Well, now I've got a trade-off, right? And I'm faced with a value decision. And I opted for the land. I sold the van, or I guess I gave it back. I think I had to pay $3,000 to get out of that contract. And now I have land that after about 7-8 more years, I'll actually own it. I mean, own it, right? Not leasing it. And these are my kids playing on the little pond that accumulates there at the end of the year in the wintertime. So this is a values decision. Is it wrong to lease a car? It's not wrong to lease a car. I'm not making a case for leases are always bad. I think they're generally not advisable. I think most of us will end up pretty close to retirement before we realize we couldn't afford the cars we were driving, right? We could make those payments, but what was it costing us in the end? Was I happy with that choice in the end, or was I not? And that's one where I think I'll be happier with the land choice than the car choice. That was a very clear trade-off for us. It's that kind of thing that I'm talking about, and it happens to all of us. So before we get into financial planning, there are 3 important concepts, and these are in your notes, the first 3 pages. I'm not giving you notes on every page of this, just some of the more important ones. There's the decision rule, there's ownership, and then there are partnerships. And when we talk about financial planning, when we talk about accumulating wealth or building wealth, we need to talk about these 3 things. First, the decision rule. The decision rule is an economic principle that says, generally speaking, individuals will make decisions based on what they believe to be in their own best interest. By the word individuals, I mean people, I mean corporations, I mean governments, I mean banks, I mean everybody, right? Everybody is going to make salespeople, everyone's going to make decisions based on what they see at that time to be in their own best interest. Now that doesn't mean, that's not a statement that says people are greedy, because some of us give money away to our church or our charity because we feel like that's in the best interest of the things we care about, right? So this isn't just a greed ethic, this is just true. And I often say the decision rule is to personal economics as gravity is to the physical world or the physics around us. We can ignore it if we want, but we're going to get hurt if we do. At some point, we're going to get hurt. Right? I can't jump out a 3-story building saying I don't believe in gravity and then just assume that because I don't believe in it, it's not going to hurt me, right? It's real, and the decision rule is real as well. And other people that we work with will be making decisions based on this rule, as will we. There's a guy, Thomas Sargent. He writes the shortest graduation speech ever, 335 words. I really like him for that. I wasn't sitting through that one myself, but he's an economist, a Nobel winner from Berkeley. I'll just read a few of the points. He just had 12 points for the Berkeley grads of like 2007 or something like that. Number 1, many things that are desirable are not feasible. Individuals and communities face trade-offs. Other people have more information about their abilities, their efforts, and their preferences than you have, right? Same about your preferences and abilities than they have. And then this last one, in the future, you too will respond to incentives. That is why there are some promises you'd like to make but can't. No one will believe those promises because they know that later it will not be in your best interest to deliver. The lesson here is this: before you make a promise, think about whether you'll want to keep it, and if keep it if and when your circumstances change. This is how you earn a reputation. Essentially what Thomas Sargent is saying is we get into relationships, we get into messes, we talk about what we've promised to our kids, what we've promised to our siblings, expectations that we set about the future that we sometimes can't live up to, and sometimes later we don't even want to live up to them. And so we want to be able to make decisions up front better based on this decision rule applying to us over the long period of time. Consequences are important of decisions. Both our intentions and the consequences of our decisions matter. We cannot judge ourselves on our intentions only. We're also responsible for what will likely happen as a result of our decisions and actions. We have to think this stuff through. I think if there's a frustration that I have with politicians, it's not that I think they're all ill-intended. I think some of them have good intentions. Many of them do, on both sides of whatever the aisle is these days. But someone has to start looking at what's happening as a result of the decisions that are being made. And I think that starts in our personal economics and our personal finance. If we're not holding ourselves accountable to our consequences, we won't hold our leaders accountable as well. So we have to look at the consequences of what will likely happen as a result of our actions. So the next one is ownership. That's on your sheet here as well. And we go through just a couple of these economic principles. Call this own your stuff. And I want to try to get at what ownership is. Ownership is a noun, plural. The act, state, or right of possessing something, like the ownership of land, right? We talk about land, we talk about other property that we can own. In economics, ownership is 3 things. This is really important. When you evaluate what you're doing, consider whether at the end of what you're doing you're going to own something. When you evaluate something you're voting for, consider if it's promoting the ownership of your stuff or for others to own, or if it's giving away that ownership. Number 1, my property, if I am to own it, should be something I'm able to use as I wish. Right? That ownership is of something means that I can use it how I want to use it. The second is that I'm able to keep profits from the use of my property, right? So if I own something, I can do what I want with it, and I can keep the profits from it if I use the property and make profits. And lastly, that I'm able to dispose of it how, when, and to whom I please. Now, I'm not saying that, again, leases were bad, but I leased a vehicle, and what did I get when I leased that vehicle out of these? Could I dispose of it how I wanted and to whom I wanted? I really couldn't. I could give it back to Nissan, but I had to pay $3,000. I was very limited. Could I use the property how I chose to use it? Pretty much. I was limited in the miles, but pretty much for $23,000, I was buying this one component of ownership of that Nissan. Nissan was letting me have it. I have a rental house that I still own. We'll talk about it a little bit later. There's a person in it, a woman with her 2 kids, and she is renting the first component of ownership because it's in her best interest to do so right now. Now, if this person or me or you rented a home for 25 years, that would be something that you'd say, you know what, you should be creating ownership for yourself or more. You should be getting more of those components of ownership. Well, sometimes it makes sense to buy just a portion of this. Over the long haul, though, I want us to have more ownership rather than less of the things that are there, of the right things that we're looking to accumulate. And then lastly, in the economics section of this are the partnerships that we will get into. The right partnerships offer the most efficient way to get where you want to go and build ownership. The wrong partnerships offer the fastest and most efficient way to lose your ownership or build ownership for others. I like this quote. I don't know who said it. We should try to find this out. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Now, I really like that quote. It's a great quote, but it presupposes something, right? It presupposes that you're going together with the right person or the right partnership, right? So if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, unless you're going with the wrong person. Otherwise, you're going to get stopped pretty early, pretty quick on the road. You're not going to get very far. The wrong partnerships are what we partly want to talk about in financial planning because they can thwart your efforts, I think. A partnership is an arrangement in which parties agree to cooperate toward the mutual interest advancement that they have. Welcome. Have a seat. Thanks for coming. How old is the baby? 3 months. Awesome. Congrats. You're brave to get out. That's quick. A partner is a person who takes part in an undertaking with another or others, especially in a business or company with shared risks or profits. So we have mutual interests, we have shared risks, shared profits. What I'm trying to get at here is that when you need someone else to accomplish one of your goals, you want to just look at the total situation and say, okay, how are they benefiting? How am I benefiting? Is this a good deal for me or not? Right? Is this a good deal for me or not? So with whom are we partnering? Let me give you an example. Let's say you want to buy some life insurance, and you meet an agent because someone that you know, a friend or a family member said, hey, go talk to this life insurance agent. And this life insurance agent either works for a life insurance company or they work for a number of life insurance companies, and they sell you a life insurance product. Who is your partner in that transaction? Pardon? The long-term partner would be the company. Right? Because you didn't sign a contract with the agent that lasted past a commission check. But it's a very common misconception. I may like the agent, but if I've got a problem with my life insurance contract, guess who also has a contract with that life insurance company? The agent. It's an employment contract, and it's not necessarily up to him or her to be still employed in 6 or 8 years, and yet my life insurance contract better last longer than that. With whom are we partnering? It's probably the best question you can ask. If you're getting a mortgage from Churchill Mortgage, are you partnering with Churchill Mortgage? It depends. If we keep the servicing of your loan, yes. If we sell the servicing to another lender, which we would let you know about, you're getting a partnership contract with that lender. Is it a contract that you want to be in? Is it someone with whom you want to be partnered? Does anybody know the name of the company that Dave Ramsey does not want you to get a mortgage from? Bank of America. He just doesn't like it, right? So please don't be partnered with Bank of America. They're just too big. They can't do this well, right? What Dave is getting at here is choose your partners wisely. Now, I think Bank of America. My brother works for Bank of America. I'm not as down on it as he is, but I get at what he's getting at because he's talking about these partnerships and who's in it for whose best interest. And over, Dave Ramsey, for example, saw Bank of America in it for Bank of America and less so with the client. So this is important. So identifying the partner is good. The alignment of interests is important. We want to make sure there's an interest alignment here. Some good questions that you should ask yourself in the alignment of interest category. How much is this person getting paid? So is the person selling the contract really my partner? How much is the bank paying that person? What am I getting in the deal? What am I paying in the deal? Just knowing those things sometimes gives you a lot more clarity. Is the organization that I'm partnering with able to keep their promise over the long term? What causes them to be able to keep their promise over the long term? And getting some of these questions answered about the partners that we align ourselves with. So have an alignment of interests is another good question. If the product I buy is a successful one, let's say it's an investment and you're working with an investment group. If I succeed, how well does the advisor or the salesperson succeed? If I fail, does the advisor or salesperson still succeed? Take an annuity or a life insurance contract. If the annuity doesn't perform, does the person who sold me the contract hurt at all? Just me, right? How does this thing work? So it's just good to know these things. I'm not saying it's wrong to buy a commission product. I'm just saying, where are the interests aligned? Know your partnerships. Do I want this partnership is just a very good question. I make the point that the right partners are a fast way to get where you want to go. I would still say, though, that you want to have a few choice partners. I'm going to suggest a few that you want to have. A few choice partnerships to get where you want to go financially in your financial planning. You don't want to have a lot of them. You want to have it less complex. You want to have it more simple. So make sure that you're not taking on partners too often. There are 4 that we'll talk about this morning and get at the kind of the details or the crux of what we're dealing with in each of these areas. These are 4 partners you can't ignore, right? I don't think I have this in your notes, but you can flip a page over and take some. The government, your employer, the bank, or your financial planner. Now, you probably naturally think of the financial planner as a partner a lot sooner than you think of the government as a partner. But in a very real sense, the government, we're all partnered with the government, right? We get services from them. We have to make payments to them. We do get some things from them. And how can we set up that partnership in a way that's going to be most beneficial to us? So we'll start with that one. We partner with the government in 3 or 4 or 5 ways at least, and some of us more. Some of us have employment contracts with the government as well. But pensions, Social Security, qualified accounts, 401ks, Roths, taxes versus services, and the like. I'm just going to give you one example that highlights what I'm talking about here. Any teachers in the room? Okay. You remember or heard about the teacher pension issue of 2012. This was when many teachers had to make a choice about how they were going to be compensated in their retirement, right? And I had many teachers coming to short little seminars that I gave in my office. We probably saw 50 teachers over the course of a 4 or 5 month period as they were approaching the deadline of having to make a choice. Now, all along it had been this pension, and it was just one choice. You're going to get a pension when you retire, and you're going to pay at first nothing for it. It was part of the contract, and then you're going to have to pay a little bit biweekly. And then the next time they adjusted it, they increased the biweekly payment that you'd have to pay for that pension, but there was never any choice. Well, this time they gave some choices. It was options 1 through 4. Option 1 was simply an increase in your payment to get the same pension benefit. All right, so now what used to be as part of the contract changed. The partner changed the contract. The government can do that, right, without much of a concern for whether or not we voted for it. We can vote for them, but they had to do something because this thing was going to crash. So they just raised the payment. He said, you're still going to get the exact same benefit, exact same monthly pension in your retirement, but you're going to have to pay, on average, $50 to $90 or $100 more per every 2 weeks for it. Now, some of these teachers were fed up at that point and said, listen, if they're going to keep changing this, what are my other options? How can I partner less with the government? Well, enter option 4. Option 4 was, we'll stop the pension you've accumulated up until now. We'll give you back what you're paying to us for the pension for any future. Your pension will no longer accumulate beyond this level. And the additional amount that you would otherwise have to pay to keep your pension, you can keep. And in addition to that, the state would pay you an extra 4% to retire. So they'll give you back what they were putting into the pension plan. So they were essentially saying, take the full pension scenario or take a more free market approach. And then there was options 2 and 3, which were kind of a hybrid of the two. And I was running numbers, and I just had my Excel spreadsheet out because that's what I do, and I'm the geek. If you're the geek in the free spirit, I'm the geek in my family, and I love running these spreadsheets. And I was thinking this was a number issue. And I was running these numbers, and I was saying, you take 7% investments, option 4 beats the heck out of option 1 every time I ran it. Every income scenario, every time I ran it. And for the people who came to talk to me, most of them would agree that option 3 or 4 was probably the one that they were going to choose. But what the numbers came back, I think 70 to 80% of teachers chose option 1. This was not a numbers issue for most people. This was a trust issue, right? What just happened in the markets in 2007 and 2008? They crashed, and they had just come back. And so teachers were faced in this almost impossible scenario with a government they didn't really trust, but was raising their payment a little bit, and a market that they trusted less, and they had to make this decision. Well, if we could educate for a long enough period and get them to read enough, we could get them to see that markets do that, and in the end they're okay. But most teachers just signed that option 1 and kept on going, and they'll get their pension. I don't think the state's going to have to make too many more adjustments, and the market does fluctuate, and some looked at it and chose option 4. This is an issue. Another similar one is when to start taking that Social Security check. You can take it at 62, you can take it at 67, you can even wait till age 70 to take it. There are different stipulations. When do we involve the government in our finances? How much do we want to partner with them? And it's a good question. And it's something that is a decision that you have to make. Which direction do you want to go as you go forward and as you build your plan? So I highlight it as such. And that teacher pension was a great exercise, both for me to learn, you know what? This is first not a numbers issue. It's a partnership and trust issue. So that's important for us to realize. The next one is our employer. We partner with our employers for these things and more. The hours we work, the health insurance coverage or dental or other coverages, pensions, sometimes employers still do those, salaries, fulfillment, stress. We have this list of benefits and costs, and we give our time and they give us the income, right? And if you're Tom Izzo, it probably makes sense for you to hire an attorney to negotiate your contract and pay them $20,000 or $40,000. But for the most part, most of us can get by with a little bit of common sense when we deal with this. When it comes to the employer, I'm not going to help you negotiate better contracts with your employers. That's not my thing. I think you're going to go apply for a job. When you feel like you're up for a raise, you're going to ask for one. But many of us are in kind of a situation right now where the employment scenarios are that we're happy to have one, and if they were giving out raises, we'd get in line, but that hasn't happened for a little while. But what I want to talk about are the 4 kinds of income that we can have, and this may be something you want to write down on a page. This was a paradigm shift for me that I have to give credit to a guy I write. Now, I don't recommend a lot of what he writes, but Robert Kiyosaki wrote a book called Cash Flow Quadrant. You may ring a bell with Robert Kiyosaki. He wrote the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That was a big rage here not too long ago. But Cash Flow Quadrant. And there are 4 quadrants, 4 ways that we can earn income as individuals in this country or really anywhere. You could be employed, where you work for someone who owns the business or pays your paycheck. You could be self-employed, where you work in a business that you own. Maybe you have employees. You can own a business. This would be a business like McDonald's or a business like Tim Hortons, and I'm not thinking of anything but fast food chains right now, but it's a system that if you purchase it, money in theory flows from it, right? Or you can own investments. Investments could be stocks and bonds. It could be a rental house. And the key difference between the left side of the quadrants and the right side of the quadrants is that on the left side, you have to trade your time for money. And on the right side, you're leveraging something else that you own to produce money for you. All right? Now, it's important just to make the first point about retirement. All retirement planning is figuring out how to move from this side to that side. That's all it is. And we sometimes denigrate the 1%, right? And maybe not us. I'm looking for a subtitle for the book I'm writing called Own Your Stuff. I'm writing a little book about all this stuff. It'll probably sell 100 copies, and most of those will be my kids and their friends. But the subtitle, sometimes I come up with it, it's for those of us who are tired of pointing fingers at the 1% or something, or those of us who have decided the 1% aren't just bad people, right? They're just rich. And all they did is they figured out how to get here earlier than we did. But all we're doing is trying to get here like the 1%. Here you make money when you sleep, right? Your money makes money, or the system you purchased makes money, or the rental home that you own makes money. How many of you own the house you used to live in? Anyone here? No one here? Own a rental house? Some of us own rental houses. I own the house we used to live in. Lots of people do these days because they couldn't sell it 5, 6, 8 years ago. And I'm thinking now of keeping it. I just improved it, and I've got renters in there, and in about 15 or 16 more years it'll be paid off, and it'll be an investment that pays money to me whether or not I go there most days. Now I've got to put some time into it. Nothing goes for nothing. Even the McDonald's franchise owner in Okemos, they run a good business, but he's going to be involved, right? That family's making this work. But it is, to a certain degree, a leverage situation. And retirement is simply leverage, or leveraging what you own. This is why owning is so important, because unless you own stuff, you're not going to have anything other than your time to pay you. And it's not wrong to work. I think and I hope I will work until my mid-70s to 80s. I hope I can always work. But I hope at some point I don't have to go there as a grind, but that I'm able to let my team handle more, and I'm able to maybe just do more things like this and work with my team. I'm trying to leverage it so that my business looks a little bit more like this, but that I'm there because I want to be. And that's what retirement is for you. We've had 4 or 5 people retire this year. I can't remember. Some of them, it was a big celebration. A gentleman that was my church as a client, he retired from General Motors. So happy to be retired from General Motors. That's the kind of place you know your last day when you choose it, and then you take off. Others, it's going to be a lot less noticeable. I hope you never notice when I retire. I don't know that I ever will. But this is simply a leverage issue, and we want to try to create ownership of our income as well. Right over here, we don't necessarily own our income. Over here, we own our income. We want to own the income a little bit more and more over time. So that's a concept that I hope makes sense. That third partner and the fourth partner, the banks and financial planners, are ones that you have a lot more choice over on a day-to-day basis as to what you can do. With banks, we partner with them for lots of reasons, some good, some bad. We need a checking and savings account. We need a debit card. Some say we need a credit card. Sometimes we need a car loan. Mortgages are pretty key in getting a house. It's pretty difficult to buy a house without at least some amount of one for most of us. I have this little quip here.
You're thinking of this place all wrong, as if I had the money back in a safe. The money's not here. Well, your money's in Joe's house. That's right next to yours. And in the Kennedy house, and Mrs. Maitland's house, and 100 others. You're lending them the money to...
So this is just a short clip from It's a Wonderful Life, right? I kept putting in It's a Beautiful Life, looking for it, and all I got was this Ace of Base song that I wished never had been written. So then It's a Wonderful Life struck me, and so here we are. This little show, I bring this in to remind us of kind of how it used to be. I mean, these people did see the banker as their oppressor, but the banker was a local person, right? It was a person, they lived in the neighborhood. The decisions about whether or not to lend to the Joneses or the Smiths was made in a bank location that was central or right around their community. That's not the case anymore. There are some stats that we did about regarding 2013. So end of year 2013, there was a state of the banking world with respect to customers. $839 billion in credit card debt existed in December 31 of 2013. The average interest rate on that credit card debt is 15.6%. I was a participant in that years ago. Was able to get out of that myself. Car loans with banks. The average car loan payment is $465 as of 2013. The average car loan length is over 5 years. It's 66 months. 20% of car loans now are being done for between 7 and 8 years. So cars, it's becoming known, are better built. They last longer. And the longer they last, the longer banks would be glad to lend to you against them. $839 billion of credit card debt at 15.6%. I did the math on that. It's $130 billion in credit card interest being earned per year on a rising level. Now, more and more of the decisions that banks are making are not happening at the local community bank, despite their advertisements about how big they are or small they want you to feel. You know, big enough to serve you, small enough to know you, kind of an idea, right? I don't know who I stole that from, but that's the idea that they're trying to give you. But here's how they think of you. And I did get this from my brother at Bank of America, and he's not super proud of it, but it is the way all banks think. There's a concept called share of wallet. You should write that down. Banks want a share of your wallet. And they say that if they have one transaction that's ongoing with you, like a credit card, that they own 25% of your wallet. If they have a credit card and a car, they're up to 50% of your wallet. And if they can get 2 more ongoing transactions with you, it is said in the banking industry that they own you. Now, what they mean by that, or how they teach their new recruits, is that customer loyalty is gained at the 4th transaction. But what they mean in the 34th floor of the big building where they're actually devising these strategies is that they own your income, right? They want your income. When they say a share of your wallet, what they mean is your paycheck. And they want a larger and larger portion of it, and they want you to be committed to them in monthly payments so that upwards of 25, 30, if the mortgage is included, 42, 43%, that's Fannie Mae's limit now, that we can lend money to you so long as your income at 43%, this is your gross income before taxes, is not exceeded as far as total debt. But they would love to have, between 20 and 40% of your income going to them every month. Even if some of it's principal reduction on a loan, that's okay. They just want your income. They want your share of wallet. That's what your partner, the bank, wants. That's what they're after. My estimate of banks as a partner is use them as infrequently as possible. Pay them off as quickly as is feasible for you, and we'll talk about that a little bit with respect to mortgages. And put your money there, but don't use theirs. This is how banks work. Now, financial planners, a few key pieces to financial planning. A lot of people call me their financial planner. It's okay. I'm an investment advisor. I do help folks with financial planning. This course is about financial planning, but I want there to be a distinction, and I'll say this oftentimes if you've had me in my office, I'll say, okay, we were talking about investing and how to get a good return in your investments. Now we're going to make a break to financial planning and make good decisions about your finances, right? But I think financial planning, and the problem with it is that we're delegating more than we should be. We're understanding far too little, and there's too little accountability to the planning that's being done as a result of the other two. Ronald Reagan says, trust but verify. And there's an example that I'll often give here. I've gotten permission to do it. I don't use names whenever I do that, but there was a couple that about 11 years ago now, I think I want to say, they retired. And they both had big pensions from their employer that could go one of two ways. They could annuitize it, take a payment, or they could take the money and invest it. And they chose the latter because they had a financial planner who then sold them an annuity. Okay, so this annuity was going to be producing $70,000 per year in income. It started out at a $900,000 amount. She had roughly $450,000. He had roughly $450,000. They retired in their early to mid-60s, about 10 or 11 years ago, and they had $70,000 a year coming, and it was said to them that this should last you into your mid to late 90s without a problem. You're in good shape. This is great. So they planned their life. They would go down in their fifth wheel in the summer times. They'd take a trip in the winter times. They lived up here. They wanted to flip a house because they still had some energy, so they were going to try to do that. And they were going. This was all before 2006 and 2007. When 2007 and 2008 hit, the market started to go down. They had delegated this thing. They looked at some statements. Yeah, their funds were down. They just thought, this is good. No accountability to the plan. Their financial advisor sold them annuity, so there was a commission paid up front. There were really no strings attached after that. The financial advisor had no alignment of interest there after that. If they lost all their money or spent all their money, the financial advisor would have gotten paid. There's nothing that would come from the financial advisor or go to them based on success or failure. And I think it was 2 years ago now, this spring, where we took over the funds, and what was left was about $135,000 after 11 years, and they're in their mid-70s. She's since passed away. They thought that would happen early. She had a bad heart. He's living on now about $900 to $1,000 a month, which works better than $70,000 a year on 135. And I think he lives in his trailer up north in Mount Pleasant during the summer, and he lives in the trailer down south where they go in the wintertime. And he's a happy guy because he's a happy guy. He's not complaining or whining about it. I don't tell that story to scare you. Hey, you could be living in a trailer, a van down by the river, you know. But it's what happened. And it was he had to sell the house on a short sale, and he can live now on the Social Security check and the $1,000 a month that his investments give him. But there was no accountability. There was no understanding. There was no evaluation, no alignment of interests. It just was a rough situation. I see variations of that. This was my seminar story. It's the worst one I've got. I use it for that reason. I see variations of it over and over, and I want my clients to evaluate these partnerships, even with me, as they go. Because an easy target is someone who has no priorities and no plan. They didn't have a sense for what their own financial plan should have been, and they didn't have a sense for what the priorities should be. And so they were an easy target for an annuity sale at that time. And yet, I'm not advocating that you understand everything about everything with respect to finances. Samuel Johnson, they say, is probably the most quoted individual of the 18th century. He says, knowledge is of two kinds. We know a subject ourselves, or we know where we can find information upon it. This is a good quote. This is where I make the distinction that you should understand how to do financial planning, and then you should put the key advisors in place to help you fill in the pieces. But the financial plan you should not delegate. You should know it, understand it. It should be yours. It shouldn't be mine. It shouldn't be a financial planner's that you say, hey, can I do this? I have no idea. Now, I get calls from my clients all the time, can I do this? And it's in the context of their financial plan that I give the answer and let them make the decision. But you shouldn't delegate your plan. And the reason is it's way too easy to do. And that's what we're going to get into in a couple minutes. First, I have a little video here. Maybe you've seen it.
Numbers to add up.
Like we're never going to get out of this hole.
Credit card debt, does it ever end?
Maybe I can help. We sure could use it.
We've tried debt consolidation companies.
We've even taken out loans to help make payments.
Well, you're not the only ones. Did you know millions of Americans live with debt they cannot control? That's why I developed this unique new program for managing your debt. It's called Don't Buy Stuff You Cannot Afford.
Oh, let me see that. If you don't have any money, you should not buy anything. Sounds interesting.
Sounds confusing.
No, honey, this makes a lot of sense. There's a whole section here on how to buy expensive things using money you save.
Give me that. And where would you get this saved money?
I tell you where and how in Chapter 3.
Okay, but what if I want something but I don't have any money?
You don't buy it.
Well, let's say I don't have enough money to buy something. Should I buy it anyway?
No.
Now I'm really confused.
It's a little confusing at first.
Well, what if you have the money? Can you buy something?
Yes.
Now take the money away. Same story?
Nope. You shouldn't buy stuff when you don't have the money.
I think I got it. I buy something I want and then hope that I can pay for it, right?
No. You make sure you have money, then you buy it.
Oh, then you buy it. But shouldn't you buy it before you have the money?
No.
Why not?
It's in the book. It's only 1 page long. The advice is priceless and the book is free.
Wow, I like the sound of that.
Yeah, we can put it on our credit card.
It's not that easy. There's a little bit more to financial planning than that, but that is, it is that simple. You do have to accumulate by living within your means and knowing what it is you want. So we want to start by owning priorities, then owning your plan, and really only then can you own your stuff and own the right stuff. So we're going to talk about priorities first. On the back of a page or in your notes, write down make 3 columns first. So we're going to have 3 columns. And on the left-hand column, write down the word have. The middle column, write down the word do. Third column, write down the word be. B-E. Have, do, be. So on the left-hand column, make a list of anything you would like to have. These are things. And it's okay to make a list of things you've thought about. A few years ago, my wife and I wanted to have a 15-passenger van for a reason I'll show you a picture of later, if you haven't known. We wanted to have a tree fort. There's good things that are good, things that are, we wanted to lease a van there for a little while. We did it and regretted that one. But things you want to have, write down a list of anything you can think of that you would like to have. Just take 30 seconds to a minute to do that. Give me one. Newer car. Particular kind? SUV. Another. Couldn't think of a thing you want to have. Perfect. Finished basement. It's good. Anything else? That's on our list. Yep. Then you get the riding mower. That's gonna hurt when they Yeah, okay, good. Season tickets? To what? Nice. That's a good one. All right, do. What I want to do. Dottie's going to have one here. I know it. She just told me about one on the way in. What I want to do. Things I want to do. You can maybe even write down who you want to do it with. Make a list of everything you can think of that you want to do. You can think of your bucket list if you've heard of that concept. Bucket lists are usually not haves. They're usually do's. What do I want to experience? Things I want to do. Throw one out there. Travel where? Okay. Grandkids, no question. I could answer that one for you. Known Dottie a long time. Any others? The least amount of debt possible is 0, so I'll just start with that, and we'll go up from there. But any others? Chad, you have one? Cool. Yeah, more. So mission things, want to greater than have to in life. Any others? Retire again? Yeah. She'll never do it. It's retire or again. Good. Okay, last one. B. where am I going here? Yeah, who I want to be. These are character traits. These are potentially titles. Someone could say the President of the United States to shoot high or low. I'm not sure how you see that office. Not as desirable as maybe we did 20 years ago, maybe. Who I want to be. Character traits are primarily it. Just be that you are, or be that you'd like to be more, or something you might not be that you'd like to be. How you'd like to be described. I'm not asking you to write an epitaph here, but I'm just a few key words to get at what's important. And as you write a few things down, just say one or two of them out loud. Obedient to God. I heard faithful. Did I? Okay. Others? Pardon? Good dad. Great one. It's great. Any others? Pardon? Good steward. Pardon?
Nothing. I said I feel like we're at church right now.
Yeah, well. Happy/content. Yep. The word content modifying happy. To how does that happen? So a grandma. That's a great. If you could come up and sit right here, Dottie, if that would be great. Just join. No, I'm just kidding. Do a little counseling there. Dottie will give you a good story about being a grandma. She's got some good ones. So, anyway, so a couple of reactions to this that I have. I'd love to get some of your reactions just to the whole exercise. So the have list, the do list, and the be list. What are your thoughts as you just went through this very quickly? This isn't rocket science, but any reactions that you have to it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Even the season tickets. Yeah, it does depend on the year, I guess. A couple of points that I like to make about this exercise. Number one, what you were saying, you would never sacrifice this to get that, right? You want to sacrifice in this direction. We give this up to get that more often than the other way around, and we'll give these things up to get that, or at least we won't give these up to get these. We see these in our media heroes, right, all the time. They give this stuff up all day long to get that. My kids and I watch the Food Network Star on Sunday nights. They love the Food Network Star, but I wonder, and I tell my kids this all the time, I wonder how many values or character flaws are being accepted for them to get stardom or fame, right? They're essentially getting up and saying, tell me who to be so that I can be the next Food Network star. I think it's really sad, and it can be entertaining. So we're just trying to make that point as we watch. But we never want to sacrifice backwards. We always want to sacrifice forwards. And the other point is, you probably all share more of these than these, right? So there's more commonality to the B list. I think there would be much more unity in our communities and in our society if we were all after these. Like we would all agreed it with everyone on the list, but we're going to agree with more of these than these. We fight over these, right? We can help each other attain these. And then lastly, you really don't need any money to accomplish the most important list, right? You need a lot of money to do these. And again, I'm not saying they're not wrong, but in perspective, so when we're talking about financial planning, I always want to start with the perspective of the most important things to us, the things that we wouldn't sacrifice for any of the others, really don't cost anything. Contentedness is a choice. Being a good steward, you can be a good steward of $10,000 and you can be a good steward of $1 million. You're a good steward of what you have. So with that kind of in mind, I never want to move to planning without having some kind of a discussion about priorities and have them be yours and not mine necessarily either. Again, we have a lot of commonalities, but this is always important. So in the light of your priorities and of what's important to you, as you've already stated it, now we're going to talk about the plan. Okay? Dottie. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Sometimes we have to have a few more grays in our head than we had before to understand that as deeply as we understand it. So, all right. So here's a quote that I came up with years ago. The planning you will do is far more important than the planning you didn't do. So we're going to do financial planning. Some of you are further along on this than others. Some of you are younger. That's great. We start where we are. We can't start where we were or weren't. We can't redo what we didn't do or did do. The planning you will do is far more important than the planning you didn't do, or even the bad decisions you may have made, the bad advice you were given, all of that. So recognize that as we start. Financial planning then is this, and you have a page in your notes that you can just follow along. You don't have to take all these notes, but you can make notes along with it. This is the numbers heavy section. And at the top of the page it says pretty much what's on this screen. The discipline, financial planning is the discipline of correctly applying 3 percentages to my income and assets over a long period of time. I think it's after the net worth sheet and or before. There we go. Sorry about that. Great. So financial planning is the discipline of correctly applying 3 percentages to my income and assets over a long period of time. And then a bit of simple math. Okay. So 3 percentages. It was first posed to me about 6 years ago that financial planning was this simple. It's understanding rate of return on investments, it's understanding inflation and how to apply it, and it's understanding income from your investments in the end. Now, why do I choose 8, 3, and 5? I'll start with the last one, it's easier. If you have $1 million in investments in retirement or at retirement, and you take 10% of that $1 million out every year, then $100,000, in order for that $1 million to perpetuate, it would have to make 10% evenly per year, and then you could just live off the interest. And if you retired in the early 80s, that worked for you for a little while, because that's what interest rates were. They were in the double digits. But in reality, when we have our money invested, even if it's 20 or 25% invested in the stock market, the returns fluctuate a little bit. So there are up years where you'll get 11 or 12 or 13. There are years you'll get 1 or 2 or 3. In a conservative account, you shouldn't see too many negative years, if any. But a 5% income from that portfolio will be what causes the portfolio to perpetuate long term. Okay, so 5% is the rule of thumb, and I don't like rules of thumb, but it's a rule of thumb that says if you live within 5% of your nest egg, it won't run out on you. If you retire in your mid-70s, you could go to 6 or 7%, and you'd probably be okay. If you retire in your mid-50s, you probably want to go to 3.5 or 4%. Does that make logical sense, right? So a lot of planning is not necessarily knowing in your mid-50s when you're going to be able to quit working, but having a target and then kind of trying to remain flexible. That's the income one. How much money can we take from our investments once we get there? And for planning purposes, for a young person, I'm just going to use 5, and we're going to make adjustments as we get closer. Now, rate of return and inflation, the reason I use 8 and 3 is not because I think I know what either one of them will be. Okay? Some people will tell you that the S&P 500, the U.S. stock market, has done better than 9% over the last 89 years since 1926. And that's true. It's done actually better than 10%. Some people will say to you that during that same period of time, inflation is 2.9%. And that's also true. But someone will say to me, you know, inflation during the 80s was closer to 10 or 11%. And I'm retiring in the next 10 years. I don't have a 90-year retirement. I have a 20 or 30 or 40-year retirement. How do I plan? Well, you plan because the relationship of these two is more important than the one you choose. If you look at that 90-year period, you see about a 9 or 10% rate of return in the investments. You see about a 3% inflation on average. There's a 6 or 7% premium that investments gain over inflation. You look at any 20-year period in history and you will find roughly that 6% premium. In the 80s, the stock market was really good. Why? For a lot of it, it was propped up by high inflation. What happens when the cost of goods keeps rising on the products we buy? Well, the profits of the companies that are selling us those products also rises. It's inflationary. It's not, is it a real increase in value? No, some of it is just an increase in cost. But the same thing that happens to the products happens to the stocks of the companies that are purchased. So you see this relationship is more important than the number. I could just as easily have chosen 2 and 7 or 5 and 10. I don't care. Choose what you want. The fact is what we're looking for is an amount of money that you need to save, and as you'll see this as we go through the form, now so that when you retire you'll have enough money based on what money will be worth then. And the relationship between these two is more important by far than the actual numbers that they turn out to be. I don't have to be right about inflation. I'm not even going to try to be. Inflation right now they say is about 2%. Could be 8% by the end of next year. For all I know, I don't know. I really don't care. My customers or clients are going to be fine because we're planning based on the relationship between the two. Okay. Step 1, so now 6 steps I think I have outlined here. Step 1 is understanding time. So I've just chosen an example. If you're 38 today and you want to retire at 63, you have 25 years left. That was step 1. That was easy. You can do that for yourself. If you're 52 today and you want to retire at 67, 15 years, that's the first step. How much time do we have left or to work with based on our goal? We can always come back and adjust this one, but we're going to start with something. Step 2, income needed. There are a few different methods, the budget method or the current spending method or the hybrid of those two. The budget method is you start to think about, in today's dollars, how would I like to live in retirement? And then you add all that up and you say, okay, if I had a budget of $4,000 a month or $6,000 a month, then I would have enough for retirement. And then we adjust that for inflation. The spending method is to say, okay, here's how much I'm living on now. And we're doing okay. I'd like to have a little bit more for retirement, which is where the hybrid method comes in. So we tend to look at the current spending method. We adjust the budget a little bit for things we'd like to do in retirement. Some of us take some money out because we don't have as many kids at home or don't have kids at home during that period of time. We can make current spending adjustments. So that we're going to kind of use this hybrid method here when we do ours. Part of the step 2 then is to look at this. Let's say this person, and these numbers are in your form here in step 2. Let's say this couple or this person makes $95,000. The deductions that they take out every year are for the normal things, Social Security, Medicare, federal and state taxes, and the money that they're saving in their 401k. So they have $28,000 in deductions for those items. These are pre-tax adjustments. Then the debts that they have, credit cards, car loans, mortgages. Let's say we have the average person that has a $465 car payment. They have the $7,000 in credit card debt, which I forgot to mention is the average, and they're paying $150 a month on that. And let's say that the principal and interest portion of their mortgage payment is $1,000. Okay? So this is how much they're paying toward this debt. Now, why would I list this here as an adjustment to the income? How many of you want to have these debts when you get to retirement? None of you. Okay, so we can move on together with this. Never had anyone raise their hand for that yet. So again, in theory, if we plan well, we don't have these debts in retirement. So net spendable income, looks like this got moved over, off the 95 minus the 28 minus the 19 is 46.7. Now, we add the items that we think we may need in retirement. I added a healthcare supplemental policy because they wanted to retire at 63, and then healthcare, Medicaid isn't full on until 66 or 67, depending on your age. And then I added a little travel money, and I backed in to get just a nice round number for my example. Okay, so $60,000 is the income. Now remember, that's the income in today's dollars. So step one is how much income is needed in today's, or step two is how much income is needed in today's dollars, and we just finished that one. Does that one make sense? You could do that, right, with your own personal situation. Get your tax return out, maybe your W-2, and you could put that same thing together if you wanted to, right along the left-hand side or right-hand side of this page. Number three, we want to apply inflation. For this, you may need a mortgage calculator online. You could adjust to make this work, or you could use an Excel spreadsheet. Because if in 25 years you had $60,000 per year in income, it would feel like about $29,000 it would today, given 3% inflation assumption. And again, I don't know if there will be inflation in the future or not. I really don't care. If there isn't, your investments will do less well. If there is some more inflation, your investments will do a little better. But for the sake of equalizing that out, we're going to just recognize that we have to do something, because what is it that's equal to $60,000 in 25 years? Well, that number is 125 at a 3%. Okay, so if we're going to have what feels like $60,000 of income in 25 years, we're going to need $125,000 in income if inflation is 3%. Make sense? That was step three, the future income number that we need. Inflation adjusted net income needed. Now again, it's net income. So now step four is the future adjustments. Now we have to go into the future and say, okay, what are the adjustments going to be? So we look at the targeted annual income amount that we have, and now we have to add back taxes, because this is a net income. We're going to add back taxes. We're going to add back the cost of Medicare. This is the amount that I normally see coming out of someone's Social Security check every year. So I put that in there. I got this from moneychimp.com. You can figure out what taxes would be on income and back into it. And then other income sources that someone has. Now I live in mid-Michigan, so I deal with a lot of people with a small pension. Less now, but folks who are retiring now are still having one. They have Social Security, which I usually take at half the expected, depending on the age of the person. So if you're in your 40s, take it at half. If you're in your 30s, don't use it for your planning. If you're in your 50s, go ahead and use it. I've just a couple of rules of thumb there. And then some people retire with part-time income or some consulting income, and I don't put it in there because I know that's what you'll have, but these are the three most common things people have in income in addition to the other sources. So 125 was the goal. It had to be adjusted by 29,500 for these adjustments, but then because of the other income sources that already existed, we could adjust it downward by 84,500. So that $70,000 of the 125 after adjustments is what the investments need to produce. Make sense? Sylvester? That's what you'll be wanting to have as income coming to you in 25 years. Right. And we just, for most folks who have a pension, we can calculate what we think that's going to be. If they're a teacher, we say you're going to get a 1% raise every year because that's on average been true. We're going to calculate your top 3 years, and we're going to calculate the pension. This will be your pension for the retirement if they don't adjust it again. If they adjust it, we come back to the drawing board, right, when that happens. But it's the structure of this that I want you to understand so that you can just fill in new numbers. When something happens in your life and changes, you can fill in the numbers and fix it. Okay, so $70,000 is needed from investments. That was step 4. Step 5 is investments required. And the question in an equation form is, how much money do I need if by multiplying it by 5%, remember the income rule? If by multiplying it by 5%, I need $70,000. Remember, I have the $84,000 coming from other sources. That plus 70 minus the taxes equals the 125. So how much money do I need invested so that I can multiply it by 5% so that it won't run out in my lifetime and I can have $70,000 to supplement those other income sources? Well, another way to write that equation is just to flip this around and divide. If I can take the 70,000, this is the most complicated math that you'll see this morning, okay? This is it. This is the hardest one. $70,000 divided by 5% equals the amount of money that I need invested so that the other equation is also true, and that number is 1.4 million. So that's how much money I need to have at age 63 to make my financial plan work. Okay? So what's the next question? How do we get 1.4 million, right? Yeah. How do we get 1.4 million? A better question is, how close will I get to my goal if all I do is keep doing the same thing? Remember this. In our deductions, what were we already doing? This person was already saving for retirement for the last 5 years. We're going to say he got his job or she got their jobs at age 33, and they were 38. So we're just going to say for 5 years, they had been investing $9,500 at an average return of 8%. So they already have $60,000, and they're already in the habit of saving $6,500, or I'm sorry, $500 per year, right? So given that habit and that current position, where would they be in 25 years if they changed nothing? Well, 25 more years at 8% plus the $9,500 a year equals 1.162. That's not that far off. You remember where I was conservative in my percentages? I said there was an 8% return and a 3% inflation. What has been the real difference between inflation and it's been 6, right? The real difference between inflation and return has been 6, and I built the whole thing on 5 to be conservative. So that way, if you missed a month, or if you lost a job for 6 months or a year, or if you had a medical thing that screwed you up for a while, or they change a contract at work and you don't get what you were thinking you were going to get when they signed up. It can happen in the free market too. It's not just governments that do it. You probably still would be okay. So number one, you're probably still okay even if you can't save anymore. Number two, you could still probably try to fix this if you wanted to in your cash flow. So step 6 is close the gap. This is the last step. Number one, save a little more now. Number two, save a little more later after the consumer debt is gone is a pretty good example. If this client was my client and this was the real situation, we'd say pay off those credit cards, then pay off the car, then start saving a little more as you double up on that mortgage payment, right? After the kids are out of the house and through college, then we can save more. That's another way to think about that. You can make up a lot of ground then. Another way to look at it is to say, well, I said 63, but what if I said 64 or 65? Let's go back in the front end and rerun the numbers there. Would I make it a little more closely if I just retired a year or two later? That's a way to look at it. And certainly you might decide then to tighten your budget and try to do a little bit more. You can see this is a moving target. I have not, I'll tell you this, I have not met one person that was going to die because they didn't have a financial plan that worked in this country. This is a very wealthy country. It's all about time. Now, they might not have liked how long they were going to have to work to earn income. And there are things that we do to cause that to be longer than we'd like. There are things that happen to us to cause that to be longer than we liked. And there is one over us that knows our needs better than we do, and we need to, at some point, submit to that and be okay with it. And yet we should plan, and we should be good stewards, and we should think about this because we don't want to be, neither do we want to be an unnecessary burden on others. We want to try to take care of our own house here. So that's how financial planning works. It really isn't much more difficult than that. When I do a financial plan with someone, it takes me about 30 minutes. I go through this in a few Excel spreadsheets. I'll show you a program that we're going to be using that for our clients will make it even a little bit easier to maintain over time. But that's it. Any questions about that part of it? You know, when financial planners run these, they run it on a program. The most widely used program used by financial planners is called the Monte Carlo simulation. Anybody know what Monte Carlo is? It's the Vegas of Europe, right? It's a casino in Europe. It's a Monte Carlo simulation. That's what they use. And it says under all the circumstances that have happened, here are all the possible results. And the outliers are you're destitute or you're a multi-billionaire, right? And then there's this solid line that starts to emerge that's much more likely. Well, you can simplify all of that down to 3% inflation, 8% return, and the relationship of those two. If you keep those within 5%, you can plan and not know, essentially, that everything's going to work out perfectly there, but based on what happens in your life, but you can plan and have reasonable assurance that it's going to be. All right, so your plan is what's more important. And I'd love for you to each do that. We have an offer that if you check the box, we can go through this with you for $100 and just print that out and show it to you the first time. And we're glad to do that. Or you're able to come back here as often as you wish. We're going to be doing these starting in August at our new facility because we're building a training room in our offices to do this a little bit more efficiently. So that means we don't have to cart boxes of stuff to various locations in the Lansing area. We can just set it up there. So that's your plan. The principles behind it, someone said, hey, did my grandpa do that? No, here's what your grandpa did, or your grandma. They gave generously. They saved 10 to 15% of their income. They paid off their house quickly. They didn't use consumer debt unless they absolutely had to, and then they paid it off if they did very quickly, and they grew their net worth on a regular basis. If you do those things, I don't think I had a sixth one here. Nope, yep. Developing a long-range mentality. They didn't think short-term, they thought long-term, right? But these are the principles behind what I just gave you. And if you never did that math but did this, you'd probably turn out just like I said. Larry Burkett, Dave Ramsey, Austin Pryor, all these guys that have written books, and what's her name, Susie Orman even, says 10 to 15%. They're coming up with the numbers from the same place. It's that differential between the loss of the dollar's value against the increase in the market. These are your three most important advisors that I think you need. You do not want to be a tax expert unless you want to be a tax expert. An investment advisor is key. That's what my firm is, Cornerstone Wealth Partners. I think there's a reason why the average investor gets about 4% in their investments and the market does 9%. It's because of behavior. I'll often write this little equation out. And the reason you need an investment advisor is because of this reality. The market does 9% as measured by the S&P 500 or the small company index or the international index, about 9%. Some of them do 10 or 11%. The average investor gets about 4% in their net return. Why this gap? It has to be behavior of somebody, right? Because if the stock market, if just owning the stock market and never buying or selling, just owning it, from the beginning of a period to the end of the period should have net you 9, why is someone getting 4? Someone's behavior, right? Now, it could be the investor's behavior, and certainly many investors in the last 10 years have been their own worst enemy with respect to investing. The panic button, the greed button, we don't stay in the investments and stay disciplined over long periods of time. Self-discipline is difficult. Certainly, advisors acting in their own best interests have sabotaged the net worth of their clients by being afraid that you'll move the money, right? So you come in 2008, the market's down 38%, and you're thinking of changing advisors. What's the advisor going to do? If they have principles, they'll implore you to stick with it. But if they don't, they'll sell you a bond fund so fast it'll make your head spin because they don't want to lose your income. Their income's gone down enough, right? Advisors are probably worse offenders than investors. Even worse than all of them are the mutual fund managers who, with their buying and selling and their activity inside, are costing you money. This behavior gap, we call it, is the reason why investors are getting 4. You need an investment advisor who agrees with your investment philosophy to be able to ensure that you get the market's return over time. And if that market's return is 7, great. Inflation will be 1 or 2. If that market's return is 11 or 12, you better get it because inflation is 4 or 5, right? So you want the market return. You don't need to try to beat the market. By trying to beat it, you will lose more often than win. It can't be beat. Beating the market requires that someone can tell the future, and nobody can. So an investment advisor is important. The attorney is important at times. You want to have a will. Some people can get away with a LegalZoom will, but probably some of us can't. A little bit more difficult. Some of us need an estate plan, more like a trust or something like that. You start a business, you might need an attorney. So attorneys can be needed as well. Other advisors that are important to us over time are these types of relationships. These are more transactional, but the advisors are the keys, the CPA, the attorney, the investment advisor, to make sure that things are going. And if you were to put your plan on paper and you wanted anyone to review your plan to make sure that it was going to be accurate and work, you'd want to talk to a CPA or a tax preparer, someone who runs these numbers all the time. Taxes are one of the biggest reasons, or one of the biggest underestimated components of our plans, so the CPA would want to give their opinion to it. So you could ask me for my opinion. We charge small amounts for that. You can ask your CPA for their opinion. They'll charge you $100. It's probably worth it just to get your financial plan looked at by someone else. And that's a whole lot better system than going to a quote-unquote financial planner who is in this process of financial planning as a product sale mechanism, right? You want to have an independent advisor, someone who is not selling you a product as a result of evaluating your plan. You want an independent evaluation of your plan, and the CPA is going to give you the most independent evaluation of that. Even more than mine would be, the CPA would be the one to have your plan reviewed. So now that you have a plan, there are a few things we can talk about, and I'll go through these a little bit more quickly. I think we have some notes to go with this. The landlord success plan, the home buying process, I'll go through relatively quickly. And then the net worth sheet, and we'll end with some long-term view stuff. How am I doing on time here? 11:25, so I think we'll get done, but if you have to leave at noon, just go ahead and take off. And there is more food. If you guys want to get something to drink too right now, or take a walk around as I'm finishing up, please don't hesitate to do that. All right. Helping you buy a home is easy. We want you to own yours. This is how a no-plan home purchase goes. You drive into a neighborhood, you see a home. How much money do we have? What would the payment be? Then we set the loan term based on what we could potentially afford for that home we just fell in love with. And the date of debt-free home ownership is set afterwards, maybe never attained, right? That's the no-plan version of buying a home or a big investment. The plan version is you set a date for debt-free home ownership. Let's say your oldest child is 3, and you want to be debt-free with respect to the home by the time that child hits college. That's a good planning mechanism. If your child is 15 and there's no way to get there, don't try to set it for that date. Set it for your retirement date. But use that mortgage payment as a retirement equalizer or a college payment equalizer. So set the date for debt-free home ownership, get some advice on what a good date would be, and set that first. Then decide the loan term based on that. So your child's 3, you want to be debt-free by 18, that's a 15-year loan. So start there. I'm not saying that's where you're going to end up necessarily, but start there. Determine the payment. Consider the retirement plan you have now, considering the college plan. If you enter that later teen years with your kids without a mortgage, you need a lot less saved for college, which in my opinion is a great way to go, because college savings in stock markets can fluctuate, and they're going to be shorter term investments, and I'd rather see you have more of your income that you own rather than hoping for these assets to be there. How much do we need to save for those other things? Determining the price, or for the down payment for the home based on the mortgage, determine the price range of the home, eliminate neighborhoods, and then visit available homes. That would be the plan version. The stats right now are that about 71% of homeowners in the last 3 months met their mortgage lender through their realtor. Now, what is that saying about the process and which direction that's heading? They're generally seeing the house, meeting the realtor, talking about the money, right? It's not always bad. It can more often than not turn out poorly. There's another stat we read in March about last year, and that was 56% of homeowners regretted some part of their home purchase decision that had to do with the finances of it after they closed. We'd like to see less and less of that happen. We'd like to see more and more of that be set on this kind of a plan. And again, it doesn't mean you don't get the house that you want. It just means you're understanding the trade-offs up front. You're making those trade-offs up front rather than at the end and saying, oh, shoot, I'm here now, and I guess Junior's not going to college because we're in this really nice house, right? It's not going to be that bad. But renting versus owning. This is a program that if you, and it's not really loading, this is just a snapshot. Mortgage Coach Edge is a nice program that we use at Churchill Mortgage to help you see your options in one place. We used to do an Excel spreadsheet, we still do sometimes, and send it to you. But now we can put this in a little website that you own the URL to. So if we're doing a mortgage option for you, it can look like this. Can everybody read that? It's okay. There we go, a little better. So if your rent is $965 and you wanted to do an FHA 30-year fixed rate loan on a home that was $125, then with $5,400 of cash out of pocket on a 30-year loan, you could have a payment of $929. I'm sorry, net monthly payment. The actual payment would be $1,084. This would be net of tax savings. So $1,084. Your mortgage rate would be a little better than this today, $475. With PMI, the actual cost of money would be 6.7 with FHA. And here again is your payment. So you're coming up with a payment that's about $120 higher than renting, and you own. And the amount of every payment that's going toward principal is $156. So that's a pretty helpful scenario. You can say about a $125 home, and I'm matching my payment pretty closely, right? Well, I just did this one next to it, a 15-year conventional type loan at a lower interest rate, about $1,093 payment on a $115,000 home with $12,000 down. Now, I have just decided I'm going to show every home buyer this information. Not because I think it's the right thing for everyone, but I think most people don't realize that it's only $10,000 less of a home, and it's only $7,000 more saved to save 15 years on your loan. That's amazing to me that that's true, but it is. Now, it is because it's an FHA, and the FHA has high PMI, but this is by far the most used first-time home buyer loan out there. And the conventional 15 is by far the least used first-time homebuyer loan out there, and they're not that different, frankly. Saving a little bit more, waiting a little bit longer, and we could even do a 5% down loan where this number would be pretty close to that one. Payment would be a little bit higher. You can still get in maybe to a $110,000 home versus the $125. You have to be a little bit more choosy, maybe a little bit more patient to find the right home at a slightly lesser price, or maybe you got to get that credit card payment paid off first, or the car. But that's really all the difference we're talking about to get to that 15-year. And you could have that house paid off before the baby turns 18 or before retirement or a little. It also gives you some other components to compare, and so it can be a helpful thing. And then again, when we do this for you, has your name on it. If we change something in our office, it's automatically changed online. You can make it automatically go to your realtor. We can do some really neat communication things with it. So some tools. Long-term renting. If you're a long-term renter, you're paying off someone else's home. Rents will rise with interest rates and inflation. Rent payments today are close to or equal or higher than owning the same home, and you plan to move more often. Sylvester. Mm-hmm. Make some money. Yeah. It's gonna be lots of factors. So if you're doing that in Michigan, I'd say rent if you're going to be there 2 or 3 years. If you're going to Texas, which you have a potential line in on, Texas is at a rising real estate market all the way through the last 10 or 15 years with very little drop. Texas with a fixer-upper, you might be able to put some equity away. If you do a 15-year mortgage, here's another staggering reality, on a home that goes down in value by 3% a year for 5 years, you will still walk away with more money than you put into it because of the fact that you're paying the mortgage down faster. So you can buy a house with a 15-year mortgage, put 10% down, the house can go down in value, and considering the real estate fees 5 years from now, you can still walk away with more than your 10% at the end of 5 years. So the mortgage you choose can make that a good decision. Rent is you're going to get nothing for. So I would say it's a bit of an if-then. If you're going to find a house that compared to the rent, you could have a similar payment and still build equity either with the increase in the house value or a decrease in the mortgage balance or both, could be good. Market matters and what's expected matters. So good question. Should I rent out my old home? I'll go through this one real quickly. My old house, I've owned it now since 2000. I've lived in it one of those years since then to now. And I've, on average, made about $100 to $150 a month more in rent than my mortgage payments over that period of time. That equaled about $17,000. The reduction in loan principal inside those payments over this 14-year period has been about $40,000. And the repairs and maintenance, I did just put a roof and siding and windows in it, were about $25,000. I had to come up with that money. the last number of years were cash flow tight enough for me that that $17,000 wasn't all sitting in a savings account like you might expect, but was something I needed to come up with and save for. So I'm still ahead $32,000 on my rental house when I think about the rent that was coming in, the principal reduction that was being paid inside that rent, even after the repairs and maintenance. So that's my 11-year period. I think I calculated that over 13 years that I had it rented. I'm in the neighborhood of about 120 to 130 days that it's been unrented. That's it. I've always been able to find a tenant. That's not going to necessarily be true in every neighborhood, but it is certainly true today. Your house will rent. If you throw it on Craigslist, you'll find out. You'll get so many calls. So many people can't, or for the same question you're asking, Sylvester, don't want to buy a home right now, but want to live in one, and they'll rent it. The landlord success plan, this is written in your notes. I'll go through it quickly. In this order, as best you can, evaluate the mortgage. Is it legal or optimal for you to rent out your house with the current mortgage that you have? There are some loans where you're not allowed to. Government subsidized loans like the MSHDA loan program, you'd have to refinance before you could do the landlord thing. Don't do this if you have consumer debt, or at least if consumer debt is cumbersome or large for you. Open a separate checking account so that you can manage your entire rental separately from the rest of your household. For most of us, that's a pretty good idea. Save 6 times your principal and interest, tax, and insurance payment on that rental. Make sure that you have some float before you put a landlord or a tenant in. Get a good lease. The landlord association or an attorney can help you with that. Researching rents on Craigslist and with a realtor, use a rental application so that you can know if your potential buyer or tenant, has an income that could make the payments, or you can even find a way to get their credit. We can actually help with that. Think long term on this. You're not going to make money in 2 years renting a house out. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 or 5. Mine's making good money after 10 or 11. And then put an ad on Craigslist. You can try to do this one first. Some people just put the ad on Craigslist first just to see if there's any interest, and then they'll take it down real quick, and then they'll do the rest. I mean, it's not a bad thing to see if your home even has a market for it. You can do that. And then the home buying process, I'm going to do this relatively quickly, and then for anyone who wants to go through this, I want to do this with my Churchill Mortgage connection. Keith Hall couldn't be here today. His son has a basketball thing, or I can do this with you. But you want to get pre-approved first, income, savings, credit. There's a worksheet in your packet if you wanted to be pre-approved for a mortgage you could fill out if you haven't yet. Understanding loan terms and options. Choosing with a realtor, connecting the realtor and the lender is important. Seller concessions is one example of something the seller, the realtor and the loan officer want to talk about. Would it be helpful if the seller in your situation paid closing costs for you? It's just one example of something that when you're in this part of the process, the lender and the realtor talking together with you with one of those edge reports where everyone can see everything at the same time is a helpful connection to make so that everyone's on your team. Then you find the home, write the offer. This presupposes that you've done all that planning ahead of time and you know what you're doing, you know where you're going. After you write an offer, you get that accepted, and then you have a home inspection. This is where somebody qualified tells you everything you don't want to know about the home ahead of time. I have paid for 2 inspections on homes I didn't buy as a result of the inspection, way back when I hadn't owned a home before, my first one, and I'm just glad I did. After the home inspection, you can renegotiate, finalizing the offer contract. Probably 8 home inspections out of 10 move right to a clear home inspection, but there are some things that sometimes need to be done that the buyer didn't realize, and the seller has to agree to do them, or agree to a lower price, or agree to something. So you finalize that contract. Then you make formal application with the lender with a property address on the application form. We can lock your loan using a float down option, so if rates get better after you locked, we can often give you a better rate. And there's an e-signature process. Some of these loan packages are 70, 80 pages long. We have a process where you can sign 1 or 2 times instead. Then there's an appraisal that has to be done of the home. You would go ahead and secure home insurance on the home. We clear conditions. I put those 3 stars there. Underwriting conditions, have they seen enough of your pay stubs? Do they want a drop of your blood? That kind of thing. My staff says, Evan, don't skip the clear conditions part because they have to ask you for that next bank statement or the expression or what is the deposit there? Where did that come from on your bank account? Underwriters sometimes feel like the meaning to life is found on the page they don't have. It's just a sometimes frustrating process, but my team will make it as easy as possible. The final approval is issued, then we do a pre-closing review, and then you close. So that's the process. We'll go through this in more applicable detail, and I think I have that in your notes as well. So, college funding. I want to talk about that just a little bit. We're coming to the end here. This is my college funding problem. These are my babies, my wife. Molly is 13. She's the oldest. And Kate is 7 months now. She's the youngest. And for about a 5 or 6 year stretch, it was about every 13 or 14 months. We love kids. We always knew we were going to have a lot of them, or hoped we would. And we have. So that is good. I have a college funding process that I'm going to share with you given this, but I always give it, and I want you to realize it's out of necessity for me. And whether you have a lot of children or 1 or 2 or 3, for many reasons, we all are, I think, faced with making trade-offs and decisions. So here's what I've been talking about or doing with my kids and in my college planning until now. So my oldest is now 13. Under 13, I'm under-promising about college, and specifically what I'm going to pay for. My 13-year-old right now believes that I am not paying for any of her college, and I might not. It's one of those promises that I don't know if I can keep, or I don't know if it'll be in my best interest to keep based on my, it's kind of a mean way of saying it, I don't know if I'll be able to keep that promise. So I'm not letting her know that, hey, this thing's a full ride, you know, start looking online where you want to go. I'm going to under-promise. We're going to talk about what college is for. I'm going to eliminate all consumer debt. The consumer debt's gone. I've got another big loan on a piece of land that I own that I'd like to eliminate, because that payment, when that's gone, I've got 5 more years to get there before Molly's 18. That would be a really good mark for me. So I'm doing the same thing that I'm advocating. We eliminated our student loans, and then we're heading to that mortgage. Pay off your mortgage. These are things that give you ownership of your income back. And if you can enter those college years with your kids, and you've got no banks pulling or tugging at your paycheck, you can basically pay as you go for a lot of it, and that's a huge benefit. I put Roth IRA next. Roth IRA is a retirement planning tool with a dual function. You can actually write a $10,000 check from your Roth IRA every year to fund the college education of one of your children. Now, it's not something where you can accumulate $100,000 and just take money out of it left and right. It's limited to $10,000, but I like the dual nature of it. You can have a Roth IRA that you can use some of, and then if you need more, we can have other kinds of accounts. But if you don't use it all, it can have that dual use of just remaining for your retirement. So I sometimes, we have people with young kids, we say, let's max fund the Roth first and then start the education savings accounts. Where I hesitate on this is where family members are giving money to your kids, so parents or grandparents. Most of the time they want a particular college fund for that child. They don't want to commingle their gift money in with your retirement money. And so sometimes an ESA account or an education savings account is still better for those kinds of reasons, but we should consider the Roth as well as a way to save for retirement. And then the ESA, Education Savings Fund, or the 529 can be used. And then even just non-qualified mutual funds. Non-qualified mutual funds are just a mutual fund investment that you can invest in with no rules. You can put as much money in every year, you can take as much money out every year for whatever purpose. So this is kind of what I'm doing to prepare for those college years that are going to start in about 5 years and won't end for me, I don't know, Lord willing, 15 years after that, and will be pretty horrendous along the way. So we'll figure it out. When kids are, yeah, go ahead. Yes, they're all post-tax. Yep. The pre-tax ones are really only for retirement. These two grow tax-free, but you're putting it in after tax. Yep. So when kids get older, 13, developing ideas together for college and occupation, talking about a return on investment with them. Again, remember, they're turning 13 thinking they're paying for this, right? Encourage them to save their own money. I wrote a blog post last week, the $1,000 challenge. You can look at evanvanderway.com and read that. It's a really good idea one of my clients gave me. I want my kids to save, and I'm willing to put a challenge in their way to incent them to do that. Set the parameters in-state, on campus, or at home, out of state, based on what you can do and what your values are. Set those parameters. If you don't set them at age 12 or 13, they're going to start to learn about what college is like from their friends. That could be good, might not be. But if you don't talk about it, they'll learn about it. Just make sure you're the one driving the big stakes in the ground. This is about when you're starting to talk about how much you're going to commit to helping. When the mortgage payment's gone, you can throw money in a savings account, and maybe your mortgage payment's going away right about that time. But paying as you go because you have no debt or less debt, and then making tangible sacrifices. I talk about this one all the time, and I sometimes joke around that we're going to, when Molly's at college or in college, and then we're all going to sit, the rest of the kids will sit in a chair, you know, with a picture of all of gaunt faces, and I hope you're having a good time in college. We're not getting groceries this week, so you can be there. It's a joke, but making tangible sacrifices, driving that car a little longer, making sure the kids know that they're here at college for a reason. There are sacrifices being made back home for that. This is not an entitlement issue. They're not entitled to this. They're there. They should accomplish what they're there to do. So this is how I'm talking about college, trying to think of everything that I can to do. Any questions about that, or ideas or comments about that? I get these ideas largely from meeting with 500 people a year that tell me what they've done. So this 15 versus 30 total cost analysis, we can do edge reports on this as well. $150,000 loan at 5%, 30-year loan, $880 payment. 3.625%, 15-year fixed rate loan, adding closing costs in, a little bit higher payment, pay it off in 15 years. I show you this because this is about $215 higher payment to pay off a loan in 15 versus 30 years. Most people, when they think about starting to save for college, they're starting to think about $100 or $200 a month that they could put in a college fund. I would suggest a 15-year mortgage might be better than that college fund, because again, think about it. A college fund is a particular fund for a particular child for a particular purpose. A paid off mortgage is just a lot of money that you don't have to pay out and can do whatever you want with. I like the second one a little better in most cases. Not exactly always, but in a lot of cases I just like owning my income again. A paid off mortgage equals income every year. The payment is not that much more than the 30. The interest rate on a 15-year is better than a 30. The return is guaranteed, right? An ESA or a 529 is in the stock market. What if the child turns 18 and the market's down? Then you're trying to juggle. I hope the market comes up by the time I can use that money for their senior year. You don't have that game to play. It's not a bad thing. We have lots of ESA accounts. We try to plan for that accordingly, but you don't have a market issue, no volatility, no qualifications or restrictions on that income that you now own. It's the gift that keeps on giving. It's not like they put the mortgage back after the kid's done with college, right? The mortgage is gone forever. Now you can start using that extra money to fund the retirement later on. Some things to think about. Talked about the planning. We talked about the priorities. Talked about a few different playings out of that in college funding and buying a house, renting out the house you own. Just common sense concepts. But I think one of the concepts that we don't do well enough is we don't develop a long-range plan. I don't remember where I learned this. I think my brother Steve, who's a partner with me, you might get to meet sometime if we work together, he said this: in the short run, our circumstances will generally change very slowly. In the long run, our circumstances will end up changing more than we could have imagined they would. When you think about tomorrow, and you think about some of the changes that might start to happen, we don't get anxious about it. Not much changes over the course of a week or a day or a month. But when you look back 25 years on who you were, what you were doing, how much money you were making, a lot has changed. I mean, really a lot. And when you think about the next 25 years, a lot's going to change again. And because we don't ever feel like it's changing because of when we're in it, we never really feel like it's urgent to get started. It's never really urgent because tomorrow is going to be pretty much like it is today, and we'll get started, tomorrow or whenever. But we have to look at this as a long-term view, and we have to recognize we need to do this little by little. This eMoney program is going to be something that helps us with that, and the video's not in it. Is there a video in this, Charlie, or is this just a picture? Okay, so this is one I took from the end. We'll share the video with you later. eMoney is a program that we're using that that connects all of your accounts in one place. So if you have a 401k and a Roth IRA and a bank account and a mortgage, you can put this all in one program so that at any given point in time, in real time, it knows what you have. And this is a program that we're going to be using with our clients to help us stay on track. And a little video that I like to highlight staying on track is this one.
That's the bait, caller. He is as good Talk, squirrel! My master is good and smart.
So we get off track, and we get off track from the silliest things sometimes. We get off track from real serious things other times. But it's important just to get right back on track again. E-money is going to help us do that for you and with you. It's going to help take the guessing out of it. Knowing your net worth, E-money will help with that. I have a little sheet in your notes that you could look at as well to write down your net worth. It's probably a good idea to do that once a year at least. I do it about quarterly. I started doing it back in the 2007, 2008 period when the market was down. The mortgage company I owned then, before I merged in with Churchill Mortgage, had a pretty rough couple of years. The mortgage business didn't do well. I had pretty much all my eggs in that one basket and had just built a house, if you remember from the earlier story. And so I needed to see a net worth statement every 3 months to know that, even though it doesn't feel like I'm making any progress, I am. And I was making lots of payments to things, and I just felt like, that it's just every month there's a line. I have this much money, I'll make these payments, and these guys are going to have to wait. And that was the Dave Ramsey way, and I did it. But the net worth statement showed me that, I'm getting somewhere. And it seems slight, and I still have these payments, but the net worth is rising a little bit. And so the net worth statement can be an encouraging thing just to do. It's not a tally, so that you say, hey, he who dies with the most toys wins. That's not the point, but it's just a progression. Am I growing wealth, or am I losing wealth? And it's good to know that it's growing. Own your excuses. There's about 10 stories I could use. Half of them would be mine. Half of them would be stories from others. I think we can sometimes get in our own head. We can sometimes tell ourselves why we can or can't do certain things. The market's down, my income's down. Well, that's no reason to get off track. It's no reason to not be a good steward. It's no reason to not seek for some of these things just because we don't have the money to do it. And one client that told me that they had all this credit card debt because of a medical issue. And there was about $40,000 in credit card debt there. And there was a medical issue that just kind of drove them into it. And I said, well, how are you doing? Well, that was about 11 years ago. The medical issue was, well, they've done pretty well, but they got into a little credit card debt 11 years ago, and they've been talking about this medical issue and that credit card debt for now 11 years and never really did anything about it and just kind of kept talking about it as that thing that happened 11 years ago. And I thought, you guys got to stop telling that story, mostly to yourself and then to anyone else, because it doesn't really play anymore. We got to be done with that one. So that's an example. I think we can say better things to ourselves. I like this from Proverbs 13:11. Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. Good thing to remember. So developing a long-range strategy and mentality. I like these next couple of slides. I think I'll end with these. The S&P 500 growth of wealth looks like this. And because this axis is a 200-point increase, and because larger numbers grow faster, whenever you see a chart like this looks real choppy, right? This is the 2007, no, this is the peak in 2000, year 2000. This is the tech bubble bursting, 9/11 right about in here. Then 2007 peak, then the drop, and this is 2010. It's now up here. The S&P 500. This is the 500 largest companies in the United States. That list changes a little bit every year, but it's just that 500 largest U.S. companies. And if you grew a dollar over the course of this period of time, you'd have $2,980.04 over that period of time, right? Well, that's not the point. Yeah, that's a lot of money. The stock market grows money. But let's look at the next slide. This was 1926 to 2010. The next slide is 1926, same starting point, to 1975. Well, look what we have. We have turbulence, right? This was the peak in 68. It dropped here. This is the peak in the 69, early 70s, and it dropped way back down here again over a course of 2 years. This was very turbulent again, right? Looks pretty similar. Well, let me inlay it here. A dollar grew to 73.18. Number one, since 1976, 73.18 grew to $2,900. There were news articles, and we could show them to you, that people would say down here when the market was 50, the market will never hit 70 again. 70 is out of the scope of reality. Well, it's 2,900 now. I mean, there's a fear mentality that sets in. The media is not your friend in helping you make good decisions. Many people bailed out of the marketplace here, never got back in because of these fear tactics. But here's the point. You look at what that 1976 period looks like on this graph in the rearview mirror. It's not that big a deal. In the moment in the stock market, things always look very turbulent and choppy, and when you compound that by the media's messages to us, we can make all kinds of bad decisions about planning based on what seems to be happening all around us. But when we look at the reality in the rearview mirror, yeah, planning makes sense. Stay the course. Keep driving ahead. Recognize that there are ups and downs in not only the stock market, but sometimes the real estate market, sometimes our incomes, sometimes the ability we are able to save. But if you know the answers to these questions, if you know what your financial plan is, and you just revisit it every so often on your own, and not delegate it, but understand the important components of it, then you'll do fine. So that's the presentation this morning. We're glad that you were able to come. Like I said, there's 25 women at my house. I'm not in a big hurry to get home. There's a shower at my place, so I will just stay here and answer questions for anyone that has them. I'll